Have you ever noticed how easy it is for the smallest things to set you off? Someone cuts you off in traffic, and suddenly your whole day is ruined. A co-worker makes a passive-aggressive comment, and you replay it in your head for hours. Or maybe a family member says something that feels like a dagger, and no matter how hard you try to brush it off, the words stick. Anger, irritation, and annoyance feel like they're built into modern life, like it's impossible to escape them. But here's a radical thought. What if no one could ever truly bother you again? Not because you suppress your emotions, not because you pretend to be above it all, but because you've actually reached a place inside yourself where you are untouchable. Imagine walking through the chaos of the world, the insults, the gossip, the slights, the betrayals, and none of it shakes your inner peace. That's not indifference. That's mastery. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who explored the depths of the human psyche, offers us a profound roadmap for achieving this. According to Jungian psychology, anger is not just something that happens to us. It's a mirror, a message, and ultimately, an opportunity for transformation. If you can understand why you get angry, and more importantly, how to integrate that anger into your inner wholeness, you can reach a state where nothing outside of you has the power to disturb your balance. That's what we're going to explore in this video. How to never get angry or bothered by anyone, using Jung's insights into the ego, the shadow, and the self. 1. The nature of anger in Jungian psychology. Anger is one of the most primal and universal emotions, but for Jung, it wasn't simply a biological reaction. It was a message from the unconscious, surfacing in symbolic form. When we explode in rage or simmer in quiet irritation, it's rarely about the situation itself. It's about what the situation is awakening inside of us. A harsh word from a stranger is just noise, unless it touches something within us that's vulnerable or unresolved. That's when the spark catches fire. Jung believed that every emotion is meaningful, even the ones we try to avoid. Anger tells us that something deep in the psyche is being disturbed. Maybe it's a part of ourselves we haven't accepted. Maybe it's a wound from childhood. Maybe it's the ego defending its fragile boundaries. But if we dismiss anger as bad or try to repress it, we miss its deeper message. Instead of being liberated, we remain enslaved, forever at the mercy of others' words and actions. To approach anger the Jungian way, we need to stop treating it as an enemy. Instead, we must learn to treat it like a teacher. Every time you feel triggered, ask yourself, what is this revealing about me? The answer won't always be comfortable. But this discomfort is the doorway to freedom. Because once you understand the root of your anger, the outer world loses its power to control you. 2. The ego and its fragility. At the core of Jung's psychology is the idea that the ego, the conscious sense of I, is both necessary and dangerously fragile. Your ego is the part of you that says, I am this, not that. I believe this. I stand for this. It gives you identity, but it also limits you. And when that identity feels threatened, anger rushes in as the ego's defender. Think about how often anger is really about pride. Someone questions your intelligence, and your ego bristles. Someone ignores your advice, and you feel slighted. Someone outshines you, and you grow resentful. In each case, it's not the other person's action that truly hurts. It's the ego interpreting it as an attack on your worth. The ego is like a delicate balloon, easily punctured by the tiniest pinprick. Jung emphasized that liberation begins when we stop identifying so completely with the ego. Beyond the ego lies the self, the larger, deeper totality of the psyche. The self doesn't shatter when criticized because it is not bound by narrow identity. To never get angry or bothered by anyone, you must learn to live from the perspective of the self. When you realize you are more than your fragile ego, insults lose their sting. You don't need to defend something that is no longer under threat. 3. The shadow and projection. No discussion of anger in Jungian psychology is complete without addressing the shadow. The shadow is the collection of traits, impulses, and emotions we repress because we don't want to admit they're part of us. If you see yourself as generous, you repress selfishness. If you see yourself as gentle, you repress aggression. But repression doesn't erase these qualities. It just drives them underground, where they continue to influence you unconsciously. Here's where projection comes in. The shadow re-emerges by being projected onto others. You deny your own laziness, so you feel constant anger toward lazy people. You repress your own arrogance, so you're disproportionately irritated by arrogant behavior. In truth, what you hate in others is often what you haven't accepted in yourself. This is why some people trigger us so intensely. They are mirrors reflecting the parts of us we most want to deny. Integrating the shadow doesn't mean indulging every dark impulse. It means acknowledging it. When you admit, yes, I have the capacity to be selfish, arrogant, lazy, even cruel, you disarm the projection. The next time someone acts that way, it won't bother you as much, because you no longer need to deny it. You've reclaimed the shadow as part of your wholeness. This is one of Jung's deepest truths. What bothers us most in others is really a disowned part of ourselves. 4. Individuation and inner freedom. Jung's ultimate goal for human development was individuation, the process of becoming whole by uniting the conscious and unconscious parts of the psyche. Anger, in this journey, is not an obstacle but a guidepost. It shows you where you are not yet whole, where your ego still clashes with the reality of who you are. Individuation transforms the way we relate to conflict. Instead of reacting blindly, we begin to interpret our triggers symbolically. A rude coworker stops being the enemy and becomes a messenger pointing toward our own insecurities. A betrayal becomes more than pain, it becomes a lesson in trust and boundaries. Even deep losses can be reframed as gateways to meaning. This doesn't mean we never feel anger again, but we stop being owned by it. Instead of saying, "This person ruined my peace," we learn to say, "This anger is showing me something about myself." That subtle shift is the essence of individuation. The more you integrate these lessons, the less anyone outside of you can disturb your inner freedom. 5. The role of archetypes in anger. For Jung, the unconscious is not just a personal reservoir of memories and repressed experiences, it is also collective. Beneath the surface of every psyche live universal patterns Jung called archetypes. These archetypes express themselves in myths, dreams, and human behavior, and they often shape the way we experience emotions such as anger. Consider the warrior archetype. This archetype is noble when expressed consciously. It fights for justice, protects the vulnerable, and channels anger into courageous action. But when unconscious, it becomes destructive rage. The person who lashes out, starts fights and thrives on conflict. Then there's the victim archetype, which uses anger as self-pity and blame. Instead of exploding outward, it simmers inward, constantly pointing the finger at others as the source of misery. And don't forget the trickster archetype, who channels anger into sarcasm, manipulation, or ridicule. These archetypal roles are ancient, but they still live in us, waiting for a trigger. Why does this matter? Because recognizing an archetype at play creates psychological distance. Instead of being consumed by anger, you can say, I see the warrior trying to take over right now. That single shift, from identifying with the anger to observing it as an archetypal force, immediately weakens its hold. You stop saying, I am angry, and instead say, anger is moving through me. This subtle detachment changes everything. By learning to recognize the archetypes shaping your reactions, you no longer become their puppet, you become their master. 6. The illusion of control over others. One of the deepest sources of anger is the unconscious expectation that other people should behave according to our preferences. We want others to be polite, considerate, competent, and fair. When they aren't, we feel irritated. But if we look closely, this irritation comes from the illusion that we have control over how others act. In truth, we don't. Jung would say this obsession with control is really the ego's struggle for dominance. The ego can't fully control the unconscious within, so it projects that frustration outward. We end up trying to micromanage people, their behavior, and even their opinions of us. And when reality fails to comply, as it inevitably does, anger erupts. This is why so much anger feels disproportionate. It's not really about the person in front of us, but about the ego's futile fight against life itself. The path to liberation is realizing that control over others is an illusion. The only real control you have is over your response. When you accept that others are free to be rude, lazy, careless, or even cruel, something paradoxical happens. They lose their power to bother you. You no longer waste energy wishing they were different. Instead, you redirect your focus inward, asking, how can I meet this situation without giving away my peace? This is not passivity, it is power. 7. Anger as energy for transformation. In Jung's view, psychic energy, what he sometimes called libido, cannot be destroyed. It can only be transformed. This is especially true for anger. If you try to repress it, the energy doesn't disappear. It festers in the unconscious, eventually leaking out as passive aggression, bitterness, or even physical illness. Suppression turns anger into poison. But when anger is consciously acknowledged, it becomes fuel for transformation. Think of anger like fire. Left unchecked, it burns down everything in its path. But channeled properly, it provides warmth, light, and energy for creation. Jung often compared psychic energy to a river. If it's blocked, it floods destructively. If redirected, it irrigates the land and nourishes life. This is why Jung encouraged creative practices, active imagination, and symbolic work. When you feel anger, don't just explode or bottle it up. Redirect it. Pour it into writing, music, art, exercise, or problem solving. Ask yourself, what is this anger trying to push me toward? Often it points to an area where boundaries need to be set, where truth needs to be spoken, or where action has been avoided. By transforming anger into purpose, you rob it of its destructive power and turn it into an ally. 8. Detachment and the transcendent function. Another of Jung's profound contributions was the idea of the transcendent function. This is the psyche's natural ability to resolve inner conflicts by rising to a higher perspective. Anger always comes from conflict. I want this, but reality is giving me that. The ego insists on one side of the polarity, while life presents the opposite. The transcendent function allows us to see both sides and move beyond them. For example, Imagine someone disrespects you in public. Your ego demands, "I must defend myself." But another part of you says, "Stay calm, don't escalate." These two voices clash, creating inner tension. If you identify with one side, you either lash out or suppress your anger. But if you engage the transcendent function, you step back and ask, what larger meaning is trying to emerge here? Suddenly the situation is no longer about winning or losing, it becomes about self-mastery. This is the essence of detachment in Jungian psychology. It's not about indifference or coldness, it's about expanding your perspective so wide that no single insult or irritation dominates your psyche. You rise into the viewpoint of the self, which can hold all opposites without being shaken. From here, anger dissolves not because it's repressed, but because it no longer makes sense. 9. Practical Jungian strategies to never be bothered. Theory without practice changes nothing. Jung's insights into the psyche are profound, but they only help if we apply them in daily life. Here are a few practical strategies rooted in Jungian psychology to stop being controlled by anger. First, shadow work. Keep a trigger journal. Every time someone bothers you, write it down and ask, what does this say about me? If laziness irritates you, explore where you avoid responsibility in your own life. If arrogance enrages you, consider whether you've repressed your own desire to be recognized. Each entry becomes a clue pointing to shadow integration. Second, active imagination. This Jungian technique invites you to treat emotions as figures in your psyche. When you feel anger, don't just analyze it, speak to it. Imagine anger as a character sitting across from you. Ask it, what do you want from me? What are you protecting? Often, this dialogue reveals needs and wounds that raw emotion alone could never articulate. Third, symbolic reframing. Instead of seeing every annoyance as an attack, view it as a symbolic message. That rude stranger isn't just a nuisance. They are a mirror for something in you that still needs attention. That betrayal isn't just cruelty, it's a test of your ability to set boundaries. This symbolic lens turns everyday irritations into opportunities for growth. 10. The ideal of the self-mastered person. So what does it actually look like to embody all of this? The self-mastered person is not someone who never feels anger. That would be impossible and inhuman. Rather, it is someone who experiences anger without being consumed by it. They can feel irritation rise, pause, reflect, and respond consciously, instead of reacting blindly. Such a person is magnetic to others. Why? Because they cannot be manipulated. When someone tries to provoke them, they remain calm. When someone insults them, they smile. When someone betrays them, they respond with clarity instead of bitterness. Their calmness unsettles aggressors. Because it reveals a truth, external forces have no power over an integrated inner life. This state is not cold detachment. It radiates warmth and presence. The self-mastered person is not indifferent to others but deeply connected, because they are no longer entangled in ego battles. They stand firm in themselves, like a mountain unmoved by the storms around it. And this is the ultimate goal of Jungian psychology. Not the elimination of emotions, but their conscious integration into wholeness. Conclusion. From anger to inner freedom. To never get angry or bothered by anyone is not about numbing yourself or pretending you're above human emotion. It's about transforming your relationship to anger through Jung's insights into the psyche. You begin by recognizing that anger is a message, not a curse. You loosen your grip on the fragile ego. You integrate the shadow, reclaiming the parts of yourself you once projected onto others. You stop trying to control people and redirect that energy towards self-mastery, and you rise into the perspective of the self, where external slights lose their sting. The result is not suppression but liberation. You become free, not because people suddenly become kinder, or the world becomes less chaotic, but because you no longer give your power away. Anger becomes your teacher, your shadow becomes your ally, and your inner self becomes your anchor. From this place, nothing outside of you can disturb your peace. Carl Jung once suggested that wholeness, not perfection, is the true goal of life. When you embrace your wholeness, anger loses its grip. You stop being a puppet of your triggers and become the master of your own soul. And perhaps that is the greatest freedom a human being can ever attain, the freedom to walk through the world untouchable, not because the world has changed, but because you have.